I'm now going to shift gears here to talk about the update to the FASFA form. So talk about a free application for federal student aid, a discussion of the history, of course, and the key features of the changes to FASFA, some outstanding issues, SHEEO research, and potential effects on states. So the FASFA it's a complicated issue, but this weekend I had the choice between digging into the granular details of the FASFA and watching Wisconsin football. Wisconsin football made that decision very easy for me, so I was focused on FASFA. So what about the FASFA? So it's the free application for federal student aid. This was created in 1992, this replaced the common application form. So one of the reasons why we have those mandatory FASFAs is because this FASFA unlocks access to those programs that I talked about yesterday. Without filling out the FASFA form, you do not get access to Pell, student loans, work study, FSEOG. So there are a whole plethora of federal programs out there, college access programs, that require students to fill out the FASFA form. Some statistics: 1 in 3 students receive a Pell Grant. 600,000 students participate in federal work study. 1.8 million students are in the FSEOG. And 38% of first-time, full-time students receive loan aid. So this is, again, incredible gateway to college opportunities. FAFSA completion facts. So this is a chart, I believe, from our friends at NCAN who follow this. But this is the FAFSA completion rates by state. So Louisiana is there at the top. Alaska is at 74%. They have a mandatory FAFSA policy in Louisiana, and that has led them to be among the leaders in FAFSA completion. Tennessee also, with their Tennessee Promise program, very popular financial aid program. Tennessee is near the top as well. So it does range considerably based on state. Nationally, according to NCAN, high school students left $3.8 billion on the table due to not completing the FAFSA form. So incredibly important to get that form. And again, a growing number of states are looking at implementing or making FAFSA completion a state graduation requirement. So before we get to the FAFSA Simplification Act, I do want to talk about the Future Act, which preceded the FAFSA Simplification Act. So the Future Act was passed in 2019, and they had the data retrieval tool that you could use to get that IRS information. That is being replaced by a direct data exchange from the IRS into the FAFSA form. And that is going to make it a lot easier. It's going to make it a lot more convenient. It's going to cut down on the number of questions. And it's also going to cut down on the need for verification, because this is direct data coming from the IRS into that FAFSA form. So we have the Future Act, and then the FAFSA Simplification Act built off of this. So the FAFSA Simplification Act was signed as part of a year-end appropriations deal by President Trump in late 2020. You see that picture of Lamar Alexander here. This was his thing. He was so focused on simplifying the form. He would go to the Hill, and he'd bring the form, and then it'd be like, I don't know how many pages long it was, just to show the complexity of that FAFSA form. And that complexity matters. The complexity matters because people don't fill it out. And when people don't fill it out, they don't go to college, and that leads to, again, all sorts of challenges. So the FAFSA Simplification Act was signed in late 2020. It was supposed to go into effect earlier this year. It got pushed back a year. But the goal, again, a shorter FAFSA, a less complex FAFSA, and a more predictable and transparent federal financial aid system. So just this morning, this is a new slide that I put together about 20 minutes ago. The U.S. Department of Education had a call this morning releasing new data on the FASFA. So if you go to ed.gov right now, you can see how the new FASFA will affect the number of people in your particular state that receive a FAFSA form and the number of students who will receive a maximum Pell. So you'll be able to see the increases because of the changes to FAFSA in your state. Okay? And the FAFSA by law, the new FAFSA, which is not out yet, we thought it would go out in October, where that's the usual cycle. That got pushed back. It has to be done by January 1. So we're thinking that it's probably going to be done on around December 31st. We've been pushing FSA to get us to early December, but it's looking more and more like it's going to be in late December. Okay. So just a few areas of change here. So the expected family contribution, which was kind of a misnomer and confused a lot of people, that is now going to be changed to the Student Aid Index, SAI. So EFC is going to be a thing of the past. Now it's going to be SAI. There's going to be greater student access to federal financial aid. So students who in the past would have been restricted to receive federal financial aid, students who did not, students who were incarcerated, and I can talk about that, students who didn't sign up for the selective service, those with prior drug convictions, they're going to have access now. Those opportunities are going to be open for students. Now, that said, with some states still have those restrictions in their books. Yep.
Tom, just real quick on the new FAFSA, do next year's students have to wait for that FAFSA, or can they do the old one now?
They have to. We're waiting on for the next academic year. That will be out December 31 around. Yep. So EFC to SAI, but yeah, just to finish off my main point. So we have state policies that are still in the books, many of them going back decades, about restrictions on drug convictions, restrictions on students having to file with selective service. So this offers an opportunity for states to, if you have some of those provisions on your books, just to look and consider whether you still want them, want to have those restrictions in place. So the eligibility now with the FAFSA will change. EFC will now become SAI. The formula is going to change. SAI will be allowed to go below zero, so negative 1,500, and this will allow the most low-income students to be eligible for institutional financial aid. Okay? And they now have, and this was something that Senator Alexander was big on, they now have Pell lookup tables. So you can look up based on the number of students and in the family, as well combined with income, and see if you're eligible for the Pell Grant. Okay, so this is a draft lookup table that FSA has put out. So dependent students. Now, when we talk about family size, and I'll talk about this later in the presentation, it used to be that there would be special consideration if you had multiple kids in college. That's going to be gone. Okay, so it's just going to be family size against adjusted gross income. Okay. So the formula is going to change with SAI as opposed to EFC. The number of children in college, this change was made primarily for two reasons. One is to increase transparency and predictability, so that way we can We could use these charts that Senator Alexander wanted people to refer to, so they have greater predictability of what aid they can get from the federal government. But also, of course, there's equity considerations. If you have 2 kids that are 5 years apart, should they be treated different if you have twins? The FASFA now is going to be more based on greater consideration based on wealth as opposed to cash flow. Okay? For low-income students, this change in eligibility is not expected to, because of how the formula is configured, the number of children in college is not expected to change because they'll probably have an SAI of 0. So in the past, you could divide the EFC in half because of, you have 2 kids in college. With the new SAI, if it's 0, it's just 0. So this is not expected to change eligibility for the lowest income students. Where this will affect students will be for middle and potentially higher income students with multiple kids in college. And this is something that's an ongoing discussion, but about how financial aid administrators have the flexibility to use professional judgment adjustments to help these families. So that is something, again, we're in continued conversation with FSA, but it looks like if a family, a family can reach out to the financial aid administrator and say, I'd like you to consider professional judgment in this case. Family farms and small businesses, this is something that SHEEO has been advocating on. I said earlier in the presentation that the new FAFSA is more focused on wealth as opposed to cash flow. So the net worth of family farms and small businesses are now going to be included as a factor in the FAFSA. Previously, this was excluded if you had a family farm or business with under 100 employees. Okay? But, and I've did a screenshot of the draft FAFSA. That's not the final FAFSA, that's a draft FAFSA. But they refer to it as investment farms. I think that's probably going to confuse people. I'm from a farming community in Wisconsin. Like, we don't call them investment farms, we just call them farms. And so we're following this issue, but we're really hoping that Congress will step up and try to get a change on this, because this, I think, is really going to affect a lot of our rural communities and students from small business backgrounds, because, again, a lot of these family farms and small business assets are going to be non-liquid. There's not something that you can easily sell in order to help your kids pay for college. So changes to the cost of attendance. So there's going to be changes here that you can see about cost of attendance and how that's considered, but just room and board, how that's going to be changed to housing and food. Food allowance is now going to be 3 meals a day, not 2. So there's going to be some changes to the cost of attendance in the new FAFSA. Pell Grant expansion. So this is based on SHEEO's calculations. This is some research that we've done. But most students will see no change in their FAFSA. But 1 in 3 students should expect an increase in their Pell Grants, but there'll be a few students that will receive a decrease. But overall, there'll be a larger increase in Pell Grant recipients. I mentioned this earlier, but these are some of the changes to expand student access to federal financial aid. And I know some states, I think Illinois has a task force on higher education in prison, and that's something that SHEEO is exploring as well, is developing a community of states to look into that issue, just because, again, there's a new opportunity with Pell Grants being expanded to eligible prison education programs. And there's now regulations and a whole process that you have to go through to be an eligible prison education program through the Department of Education, but it will require the Department of Corrections, the SHEEO agencies, and other stakeholders to be, accreditors and other stakeholders to be working together on those programs. And then the simplified form, just due to the Future Act, the number of questions is going to be reduced from 108 down to 46. If anyone still fills out the handwritten form, it's going to look kind of the same, just because we still need those asset questions. Most people don't fill out that form anymore, but if you do, it's going to look somewhat similar. But for those that fill it out online, the questions are going to be greatly reduced. There are going to be also new questions on race and ethnicity, but those questions are not going to be a factor in any eligibility criteria. They're just going to be used in the aggregate for analysis. Some of the outstanding issues here that we're thinking through right now, I mentioned professional judgment, evaluation of family farms. So how do you make that evaluation? That's a real concern, I know. Federal tax information data access. So the latest I heard is that they want to get the FASFA up and running, and then they're going to talk about federal tax information. Because this is data coming directly from the IRS, that does come with new rules and regulations. And we've heard from a number of our states about the importance of that FTI data in reports to the legislature and other stakeholders on federal financial aid. So some state concerns about FAFSA simplification, communicating, of course, these changes. We're going to be in a real rush just because, again, we usually start the year on an October 1 cycle. That's going to be basically a January 1 cycle. So it's going to be an all hands on deck to try to get students to fill out this form. Potential statutory changes to make state aid more aggressive. Changes to the Pell Grant eligibility and award amount. So again, for some states, they tie it to their federal Pell Grant eligibility. And so this could affect your state financial aid program. So if you have a lot more students that are eligible for Pell, there'll be a lot more students that are be eligible for your state financial aid program. Okay. And again, this is just, as I mentioned earlier, but I would just stay in contact with your state financial aid agency. Some states have already done modeling. I know Iowa has done some modeling on this with the team there, but just to see how these changes could affect the eligibility for some of your state financial aid programs and how that would affect the budget for those particular programs. And then just to finish up, as I mentioned earlier, the policy window for the states. So this, for some states, this is going to require a change in regulation. It's going to require a change in statute because they use the term EFC in their law or in their statute. That term is gone. It's going to be SAI. And there could be other ties to the old FASFA that are currently in your state laws or regulations that you would need to change. SHEEO is seeing this. Again, we have a learning community of states that is digging into this. We do see this as a policy window to take a step back and really look at your state financial aid programs. If you're making changes to regulations, to state laws, to say, hey, looking at our state financial aid program, looking at the new FAFSA, is this an equitable program? How much more is this going to cost? Are there administrative burdens that we can change? Administrative burden, of course, is a huge issue. Can we make this easier for students to complete these programs? So we're really challenging our states and working with them on how they can use this opportunity to best improve student access to financial aid. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yep.
Thank you, Tom, for the information on this. My question is, how do they propose to come up with the value for the family farm? I mean, you don't put in all the combines, you don't put in all the tractors. So how do they come up with a net worth of a family farm?
That's a good question. And that's a question we've been asking too, because two people could look at the same farm and have wildly different valuations on it. And we're concerned that for some people, they may think that the government's going to audit them or something like that and just lead them to not fill out a college application. So I have a colleague who I work with who used to do valuations, and he calls it an art, not a science. So it's definitely something that we're watching, and just because of the effects it could have on students. Yeah, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara Ballard. But I have a question. You said for people who have multiple children
In college.
in college
Yep.
will not get a break.
No.
Well, if I was applying for one because I needed financial aid, what am I supposed to do if I have 2 or 3 going? Who came up with something that absurd?
That's a real concern. And before, of course, with the new formula for low-income families, the way it's set up, they will still get the maximum Pell Grant. But for those that are, again, in the middle class or above, it has multiple kids in college, they will not get that break. But again, that's where you can appeal to your financial aid administrator and say, you can potentially use professional judgment to make that call. Yep.
What's
Tom,
middle
maybe
class in terms of what does that band look like for the purposes of this? Do you know?
Yeah, I would have to look into that.
I'm just curious.
But
Okay.
yeah.
And is the break you're talking about like subsidized loans versus Brandy, Michigan, subsidized loans versus unsubsidized loans? If we're not talking about, it's not really, they're not getting a break, meaning they're not, but these are not students that would be Pell eligible. Is the break you're referring to subsidized versus unsubsidized loans?
I thought it was on Pell eligibility, but
Well, right, but you're saying
yeah.
that the Pell eligible students won't be impacted.
The low income,
Right,
the lowest income, yeah. They would have an SAI of 0,
yeah.
but the ones that are higher up,
Maybe
Maybe,
would have
yeah.
qualified for a Pell Grant?
potentially, yeah, if they had
a lot of kids in
multiple kids in
college.
college, yep.
Thanks again, Tom, for this great information. And maybe I missed it in the conversation, but how do they define farm? Do they provide a definition?
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk about this, and there was a talk, I was in the NASGAP meeting a few weeks ago about this, and about, if it's continuous, to the house and everything like that, and I'm still trying to figure that one out myself.
Because
So,
there's a lot of different kinds of farms. You have a wind farm, you've got a, wooden
yeah, I think
hardwood farm.
it's
you've
considered probably, I think they're probably using the term, considering it like a traditional farm. I'm not
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, Mike Harnisch, South Dakota. If you want an easy example is, in the winter, I may have $1 million worth of seed sitting there. When I put that seed in the ground, do I have $1 million or not?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that we've taken up and used in our arguments, that their net worth can change based on the season. So that's one of the reasons that we're pushing for reform.
Tom?
Yeah, Tom, have some states talked about privacy issues? I know when it's been brought up in Missouri, that's been a real concern.
Yeah, we have had a few states on the issue of on the race and ethnicity issue, and I think it was in the context of transgender students. I'd have to double check on that, but there are protections in there for the federal government not to give that particular data to states.
I know the issue on transgender, kind of the discussion was we're going to ask it but not share it.
Yeah.
And so that might be good, but that does raise some red flags as far as privacy and
Right.
even asking it to begin with.
Yep, and I've had people reach out to me just like, why are we asking this question? This is an invasion of privacy and the like.
Right.
I think we have one more question, Morna.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Susan. Appreciate it. All right.
It's always great to hear from Tom.